Hey everyone, Harris O'Malley from DrNerdLove.com, and I know I've been promising this to you all for a while, so we are finally here, we are finally doing this. Welcome to NerdLoveLine, or some other title that's not going to get me sued for trademark infringement. We're still workshopping it. If you got some ideas, share them in the comments. And with me is, you know her as a voice actress, you know her as an internet personality, a sex educator, a woman who understands the importance of giving a fruit tree on a date, Crystal Donovan. You've met her before if you've seen my stream on Super Seducer.
That's me, that voice, in the ethereal, disembodied voice.
The eternal what the is going on as we were watching
Like
Laruina's advice.
the internal monologue of what is happening in this game right now.
You know, people are actually asking me if I'm going to stream a second version of that. Like, if I'm going to stream a sequel.
Don't. Wait, there's a second one, though?
There's a sequel.
Oh, no. I mean, you should, but also, I don't, because of my love for how bad it's gonna be, I would say go for it, but do we want that to exist
I don't know.
on the internet?
I'm questioning whether or not I want to subject myself to that. I mean, there's that whole pure views thing versus, like, my sanity. I mean, if Kotaku really wants to pay me to review that one like they did the previous one, then I'll consider it.
Yeah. No, that's
myself.
Okay, that's worth it, right? If someone's gonna pay you to say how bad the game is at any sort of real world advice.
I mean, I guess I shouldn't prejudge it because who knows, maybe he got better, but I've seen the emails for it and I don't think so.
Wait, is that one of the emails that I've seen you post on Twitter of just
I haven't
like
shared that one, but we are here to answer your calls. I've been taking the calls. I've been making sure that, like, wanting to get the scheduling all set up. We are finally doing this, so let's get your calls.
Hey, this is Al, long-time listener, first-time caller. My question is essentially about how we can try to educate people about the negative stereotypes and, thoughts about older and experienced people. Just a little disclosure, I'm unfortunately still flying the Virgin Airlines myself, but, every now and then, there's a movie or something happens in the news and, stereotypes about people in this kind of community are a little negative. So you've always talked about, how we should try to, make an example of ourselves and try to make, the world a better place one person at a time, starting from within. So every now and then if somebody makes a joke about a 40-year-old virgin or, about, guys who don't have game or anything like that, how would you suggest trying to, counteract this or, without necessarily being one of those, he doth protest too much kind of people? I appreciate your podcast and keep on rocking those awesome shirts.
My first thought for dealing with the stigma of being a virgin is not to call it flying the Virgin Airlines.
That's cute. Honestly, I like if you can approach it with that sort of self-humor and sort of tongue-in-cheek on your own, like if you have that good of an attitude about it that you can pull off saying that, I wouldn't say that that's like the first mark against it in my book. But of course, like, you've given some really great advice on this before on how to sort of combat that stigma. And I don't know, I guess I'm interested in how you would deal with it in your personal friend group.
I mean, the first thing I would say is that people are going to take their lead from you, and the best thing you can do is not treat it like a big deal. I mean, the only problem I have with making jokes about it like that is because it's still kind of treating it like it's shameful.
Fair.
I gotta make fun of myself before somebody else makes fun of me first. And that kind of leads to the stigma of, like, yeah, I haven't had sex, therefore something is wrong with me. And you kind of have to treat it as though it's just one more thing you've never done, whether it's like, yeah, I've never gone scuba diving or I've never had sushi. It's like, okay, I've never had sex. That doesn't change who I am as a person.
Right. And I honestly, depending on how vocal someone is about it, it's not like something people can just tell. When you can, sort of own it as if it's not a big deal, you're not the stereotypes from film, like it helps combat that just by, like, being you.
Yeah, and honestly, that the film thing is something I'm going to come back to in a little bit with another call we have. But I have gotten so frustrated with even movies that are supposedly on the side of the virgin. Like, the 40-Year-Old Virgin is the one I keep coming back to, where it's just, okay, he's a man-child because he's never touched a booby. And it's like, no.
Eh,
It's just like, I have problems with this, and I also have problems with the fact that, like, he has to give up all of his really awesome collections in order to be, like, a real man now that he's in a relationship with Catherine Keener.
right. You just leave. I left childish things behind. What's that one verse? Like
Yeah, whereas all of his friends are just as childish as he is.
exactly. It's I guess another angle I could come at this question from like on a more personal level is I'm bi, but I'm strictly heteroromantic. So I only want to be in relationships with guys. But I am physically and like flirtily attracted to women as well. And until fairly recently, in the past handful of years, I didn't have any direct sexual experience with women. So I'd been with several male partners, but I'd never been physically deeply intimate with a woman. And that never stopped me from being flirty, from voicing those attractions, from still being interested in pursuing that. Like you had said, Harris, first approach it as not a big deal. It's something you just haven't tried yet.
It's just an experience. You haven't had it yet. It's okay.
Yeah. I think part of, not to like jump off this, but it just made me think of another way to come at this. And I think you'll agree with me here is I think part of where the stigma comes from in addition is this idea that like you should have like gotten all that out of your system in college and now it's too late.
Yeah, or
And
we have this narrative that you're supposed to have lost your virginity by a certain age.
right,
And
right.
usually at some milestone moment, like, yay, you've lost your virginity at prom or, at
Right.
graduation or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not helping that because I lost my virginity on Halloween.
Oh man, that would have been great. I lost
None more
mine.
goth.
I lost mine after my first full year of college. So like and everyone that I knew seemed to have already lost theirs in middle school or high school. And it felt like I was so behind. But I lost mine when I was ready and with someone that I'm happy I lost it with.
Yeah, and that's the thing I always tell people is that there is no right or wrong time to lose it. There is no designated age where it's too late. It's just a question of where you are with your life, your personal development, and sometimes just plain old circumstances. I've got a friend of mine who literally was a virgin until marriage. And that wasn't until he was in his late 20s, early 30s. That was by choice for him. Not a choice I would have made, honestly. But yeah, I'm not going to go fatalistic and say it's going to happen when it's going to happen. But I will say that there isn't a timeline, and you really don't want to compare yourself to your friends because they're on their journey, you're on yours. Everybody's got different circumstances.
Hi, Dr. NerdLove. This is Eric, and I am a college student right now. So I was wondering what you thought about Daygame on a college campus. I'm a musician, and lately I've been relying exclusively on meeting women at bars and nightclubs and places like that. And I've had some success with it, but I'm starting to notice that it's limited because at college my social circle isn't exactly the biggest. And a lot of the time I'll see beautiful women in places like the plaza, cafeteria, library, or the basketball game, and I'll think, hey, I'd like to get to know them, but they're not in my social circle, so I'd have to do a cold approach. But I was wondering, is that like socially acceptable to do that on a college campus?
I can always tell who's been reading the game and who's been reading all the pickup books because they're using PUA jargon.
Yeah, like cold approach.
Well, cold approach is an actual term that other people use because it's like cold calling or cold sales approach. But day game and night game, I used to use those, but now when I use them, I feel like I'm doing a It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia reference.
Day game.
Yeah, day game,
Feature at the
enemy of
night
night
game.
game. But for people who don't know, the difference between quote unquote day game and night game is night game is generally, obviously, it's done at night, but it's usually done in places like bars, clubs, that sort of thing. Whereas day game is what people refer to as approaching folks going about their lives during the day at times that it's not usually considered like pickup hour. So it's like approaching people at the mall, walking down the street, sitting next to you on the bus, that sort of thing. And so he wants to know, what do I think about day game on a college campus? And I'm assuming that you're supposed to be on this campus. You're not just hanging out trying to hit on co-eds.
Yeah, I was also going to, benefit of the doubt, make that assumption.
Because that's, I mean, okay, granted, I'm in Austin. It's kind of hard to chuck a rock and not hit a college campus around here. But the thing is, if you're a student at college, this is more of a warm approach than a cold approach. You already have a social connection to people. So it's a little
Multiple ones, likely.
yeah, and you're in a place where it's considered appropriate to get to know people because they're your peers. They're usually around your age. They're usually in the same place in life as you are. And you've got a lot in common, at the very least being that you're students together, and that's an automatic intro to conversation. It's like, hey, I've seen you at the student union. My name is... The key, though, is to that you want to approach people, and Crystal, you can speak more to this because you're the one who's going to be more likely to be approached than I am.
Right.
But you want to approach people who are open to being approached, or who at least are not violently opposed to it. One of the things I always tell people when they see someone at, say, the coffee shop, is you want to find someone who is not there, who's not working, who's not really furiously concentrating on something. You want someone who's kind of
Right.
like killing time or just
Right.
relaxing.
So as a lady who was on college campus for some time, I can say that being approached is a thing, and it's definitely not a taboo. It's not something that you have certain times where you're encouraged not to approach women. They've got their headphones on. They look focused on where they're going. They're standing on the subway and like scrolling their phone. They're on their work commute, right? But people meet a lot of their closest friends in college. You come into contact with tons of people within your normal social circle just because you end up in a class with them. Like, college is a great place to meet new people. And so I feel like there's an openness there. Like you were saying, it's already a warm approach because you already have multiple things in common.
And there's also a lot of opportunities to meet other people because there's so many clubs, there's so many events, there's so many...
Yeah, get involved in every club you can.
Yeah, there's so many places where you're going to go where you're expected to get to know people, and that makes it a lot easier than necessarily trying to cold approach somebody you saw at the football game.
I mean, even I think the football game is actually a good example. I met a lot of people just being casually flirty, or even digits got exchanged at hockey games at my campus. Hockey was like our big thing. Cheering for the same side, ending up next to anyone in the stands, share a nacho, like.
Oh yeah, you've got an instant opportunity to make like what people call an observation opener, just like dropping some observation of or in casual conversation and letting them have an opportunity to speak up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So yeah, I would say, I in the voicemail, some of those examples were some of these just open air areas. Like, oh, what if you see him in the plaza or the cafeteria? For me, just like sitting on the quad or like standing around in just like an open atrium or something, I would find that even personally harder to just like walk up and approach someone in that scenario. So I feel like it is a lot easier when like you were saying, join some clubs, those other things.
Depending on circumstance, one of the things you could do is simply ask for help, ask for directions, ask for information. Because that's a legitimate excuse to start a conversation with somebody, and you can segue that into an actual conversation, especially if they're new or if you're new. It's like, hey, do you know where I find the class registrar's office? I just transferred here. I need to get out of my English 101 class, whatever. And then you can sort of start the conversation. Hi, my name is, and then start looking for those commonalities, looking for those things you have in common, and testing to see if there's any chemistry.
Yeah, that's really smart. I like I said, that would not be a situation where I personally would be like, I'm just gonna walk up to this cutie patootie I saw in the quad, because I personally am more comfortable when I already know that we have something in common.
Hello, Dr. NerdLove. This is Anderson from Connecticut, and my question is, okay, so over the years, I've developed more confidence and more self-esteem, I can go up and approach girls. But my problem is that a lot of times I just don't know what to say. I'm still working on my flirting and just talking. I don't really talk a lot. I'm naturally a quiet guy. I want to know if you could break down kind of like the flirting process. A few more tips and hints on that.
This one gets interesting because he's asking two questions, really. He's asking, how do I not run out of things to say? But also, how do I flirt with someone? And the first one is easy. If you want to make sure you don't run out of things to say to someone, you ask about them. You just get interested in getting to know somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because this is one of those things I'm always saying is that we are all our own favorite subjects, and we love to talk about ourselves or what we think or the opinions we have. And most of the time, we are talking to people they're waiting for their turn. They're not actually listening. So the first time that you get to talk to someone who wants to know about you, who wants to know what you have to say, that's a gift. That's something that makes people feel amazing. And that triggers the reward theory of attraction, where we prioritize the relationships that we have with the people who make us feel good. So if you can make someone feel good that way, they're going to want to spend more time with you. Now, flirting is a trickier topic because flirting is really personal. Like it's a personal style as much as anything else. Not everybody's going to have the same flirting style.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, my flirting style is a little more of the antagonistic banter. Like I kind of like flirting with someone who's gonna jab back at me.
Right.
So
You like getting someone a little on their heels so that then they come back.
A little more of a duel, like the Myrna Loy, William Powell, Thin Man vibe, where people are back and forth, or something in this century. The train scene from Casino Royale when Bond and Vesper meet for the first time.
Okay.
And they're kind of poking at each other, and that's just a moment of like the sexual tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Of course, when I'm doing that, I'm also testing for complementary personalities. So someone who's not into that is someone who I'm less likely to be compatible with, because like I'm not negging them. It's just I'm looking for someone who kind of likes that verbal joust.
And that's not something you can just like notice, right? You have to get in there and try that to see how they respond. And like Anderson said, that he's fine with the approach. He's fine with starting. He's fine with an opener, but he's not sure how to keep it going. And you know what? That might not always be you. Your style going in there, you might feel like you said, you're okay with the approach and the confidence at the beginning, and whatever your style is just may not be matching up with some of the people that you're approaching. And so I would say don't write yourself off as like, I can't keep a conversation going, I can't do this. And like, sure, it's great to have that introspection and that self-analysis and wanna try different things and figure out better ways to approach stuff. I think that's a great attitude, and that mindset is going to get you really far in life, not to mention in dating as well. But also keep in mind that just maybe your personal style of being flirty with someone, or the types of stuff you're interested in talking about or asking a person, maybe that person just isn't responding to those particular things. And that's okay. It's just a misconnection.
And it may just be that they're just not interested, and that's why you're getting nothing back from them. The key to keep in mind is that the basic principle of flirting, whatever your style is that you're trying to let somebody know that you like them, that you're interested in them as more than just a platonic friend. And there are a lot of ways of doing that. You want to do it in a way that's fun and enjoyable for both of you. If it's not fun for both of you, it's not flirting.
Right.
And so some people are very jokey, and you have to be careful not to turn it into a stand-up routine, but they like to make people laugh, and that's what works for them. Some people are very direct. They'll be really upfront about like, I think you're amazingly gorgeous. And for them, that works. For other people, that's really over the top or really too much. And there's a certain amount of just figuring out what works for your personality and what syncs with the person you're with.
I also think that, and we've chatted about this before. I've seen you tweet about this sort of thing, that the best way to approach flirting is not necessarily to go in with this idea that like you're aiming for digits, or you're aiming to make like a connection that may eventually go romantic. The best way to make sure that you're flirting in a way that's fun for both of you is flirt just to make the other person feel good.
Yeah.
If you're going in and you're trying literally only to flatter, if your only goal is to like get them to like you, the best way to get someone to like you, like we'd already said, is make them feel good. They will associate that with how they feel when you're around.
And the other thing is, when you're flirting, and this is something that a lot of guys don't do, use it as a way to explain why you like them. Because otherwise it's just a case of like, why are you talking to me? What is it about me that you think is interesting? And it gets phrased a lot in the pickup scene as, what do you have going for you besides your looks? And asking somebody that's a ugly way to do it.
Let's maybe not.
Yeah, but there are ways of expressing that actually say like, oh, this is why I think you're awesome. To give an example, there was a time I was talking with somebody that I'd met at a bar, and at first it seemed like it was going nowhere. It was like trying to pull a conversation from a stone, because I was like, so what do you do? What are you passionate about? And she's like trying to tell me that, no, I'm not very interesting. I don't do very much. And okay, cool. What's your story? And she was talking about how she had just gone on vacation. Oh, cool. Where'd you go? Oh, she had just gone to the Caribbean, and she was learning scuba dive for the first time. Oh, wow. I'd love to learn to scuba dive. I'm kind of terrified of it, because at least when I'm on land, everything can only come to me from certain directions. Saw Jaws at a young age, so now I'm afraid of things coming up from me from the ground. And she tells me a little bit more about the scuba diving, and then talks about how she and her scuba team found a pirate ship that had sunk.
I'm not interesting, but I just found a pirate ship this weekend.
Exactly. It's like, I'm sorry, you just told me that you don't do interesting. There's nothing cool about you, but you found a sunken ship.
Yeah.
Maybe you could have led with that.
That actually brings up another good topic or approach or style. In there you were talking about she had gone scuba diving, and your response was to be like, oh, I'd like to do that one day, but like, I don't know, I can't. Letting the other person feel like they're the expert, or they have the opportunity to lead that conversation, is such a good way to keep someone talking and to keep them interested in chatting with you. Don't necessarily outright lie, right? If you can avoid it, because eventually if this does become something, they will find out that you told them when you met that you have no idea how hockey works, and yet you go to your first game together and you know all the right times to cheer and what the penalties are.
I'm sensing there's a personal story here. Because that's an awfully specific example.
I used it as an example because I'd already talked about hockey, okay? I'm trying to maintain a through line for your episode. But yeah, letting the other person feel like they get to convince you that, no, it's not scary, it's so cool. Letting them be excited about something and then matching that energy, like following them through that passionate talk, is such a great another great way to like continue to find things to talk about.
And really kind of building on your point there's also a gender dynamic to it. So if you're a straight guy hitting on women, then letting them be the expert and not mansplaining shit to them is probably going to be a unique experience, or a very rare experience. And this is especially true if it's like I see geeks do this all the time. They meet someone who's got a geeky interest, they've got a cool t-shirt or whatever, and they kind of go alpha nerd on them, where they're like either barraging them with facts to try to prove they know their shit, or they're doing that weird gatekeeping thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that they're trying to build a connection, when in reality it's what they're doing is saying like,
closing the gates.
Yeah, prove to me that you're actually a nerd. Whereas if you can say like, what does beaver bother? And now you can explain to me what the heck that is. And I can be like, oh, okay, I've never played that one. Or I've the only Donkey Kong Country game I ever played was the very first one on the Super Nintendo, because I'm old.
Yeah.
Hello, Dr. NerdLove. My name is Ariana. I'm mostly calling with the question of, quote-unquote, taking your shot with a person, which is basically asking a person that you may have not personally had first-hand experience with, but you do want to take interest in a person. Should you or should you not even if you've never had personal one-on-one time with the person.
It's interesting that a woman is asking this because this is usually something the guys have to deal with. And to me, the short answer is the same way you would get to know somebody you've just seen at a club or at a bar or whatnot. You approach. You just kind of get to know them, start a conversation going, and kind of use that to kind of feel out whether or not there's any chemistry, whether there's any attraction, whether you like them even.
Another thing for me that I'm sort of trying to read between the lines here in this one and gather, it feels like this is a person who's in their social circle that they just haven't been able to get one-on-one time with. Mm-hmm. Which definitely could be approached in that same way. And I think that's a great option. I know that personally, trying to let a guy know that you are interested can be difficult.
And there are a lot of ways of doing that too, even if it is in a big group setting. One of the things I'm always telling people is that if you feel like you need some privacy with folks, there are a lot of ways to do it that don't involve making it seem like you're the hyena trying to pick off the straggling gazelle and get them alone.
Right.
Say you're at, if you're a bunch of people hanging out together, you can say, hey, listen, I need to get some air. I need to have a quick smoke break, get away from the noise for a second. Why don't you come with me? I need to go get a drink. Keep me company. That's an easy way of getting someone to come with you without necessarily making a big production out of it or making it feel like you're trying to signal, I want alone time with you.
Right. Like you might not have to jump directly to that. I guess why I sort of went there is it sounded like she might kind of specifically want a date because it feels like, she's using some of this language that feels more direct, and she's not sure if that person's interested in her in the same way or if she's still trying to figure out how much she's interested in them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that, like you were saying, that there's ways to get a few minutes or, a couple seconds here and there. And honestly, even in a big group, there's always like 4 or 5 conversations going at one time. And creating a situation where you and that person are one of the conversations is not horribly difficult. There's ways to get those moments to start feeling, putting some feelers out to see if you might be more interested.
And even in the group, you can get the feeling of privacy or kind of dividing off that conversation through really simple stuff like body language. Because if you can kind of step a little bit away from the group and get them to follow you so that you can talk, it feels like you've stepped away and now that you have your own little space. And you can enhance that by doing things like turning people so that your back is between them and the rest of the group, or that their back is between them and the rest of the group. And you're kind of creating that little like zone of privacy. It feels private. It feels like you've got your own little space, even though you haven't moved anywhere. And if you want to date, don't be subtle. Just it doesn't matter how emotionally intelligent anybody is. We can all miss the obvious signs. So yeah, just beat someone over the head with a clue by 4.
Literally a clue by 4. I love that. Yeah, you know what? If it comes down to it, if they're just not getting the hint, straight up, I'd like to go on a date. Like just say date. Just say date.
Hi, Dr. NerdLove. My name is Patrick. Really enjoy your work. I had a question regarding conversations that I can have with friends when they turn towards sex and dating and love and all that stuff. I continually find myself getting very envious and or jealous of just the experiences that they are conversing about. And I find that can sometimes be a very overwhelming feeling to the point where I think it makes me anxious, and that anxiety does not help with my social pragmatics that I'm trying to improve upon. So my question is, how can I help combat those feelings of envy that I get during these conversations about sex? I believe that they derive from the fact that I don't have a whole lot of experience, or as much experience as the people in my peer group.
This one I actually have a personal connection to, because when I was in college, I felt this all the damn time, especially through my freshman year. I was still a virgin. I had barely dated anybody. I hadn't had a relationship that lasted longer than like 3 weeks, and almost never went beyond like some kind of minor makeouts. And then there are all my friends in the group who are talking about all of the weird, crazy sex they're having, especially some of the older ones. And I'm sitting here going like, cool, yeah, no, I totally know what you mean.
Great.
Yep, this is great. I got nothing.
I could really contribute to this conversation. That's
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, and then it starts to go back to the 40-year-old virgin. It almost feels like you got to say anything to just contribute somehow, and that's how you end up with like that bag of sand like reference.
Oh no, I forgot about that scene. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, just feeling like I gotta say something.
Something out there.
And you don't want to necessarily drop the whole like, yeah, I got nothing because I've never done anything. Part of what I would say is talk a little bit about your actual experiences, what little ones you have. And if you have absolutely nothing, you can kind of talk about the attempts at trying to gain experience.
You would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, how much your friends likely would love to give you all of the advice on how to broaden your experience. You know, if you are like, oh man, there was this girl and it came so close and then it just sort of fell apart. I will put money on the fact that 1 to 7 of your friends will immediately be like, this is what you should have done, or this is how it could have gone, or, oh man, I had that exact thing happen to me.
I'm called out here.
And feeling like and so not just only you would be surprised how much they would love to help you with this, because it does sound like you'd like that experience from the voicemail. So and if you don't want that experience, like that's perfectly fine. But I'm approaching this from the tone I get from the voicemail is you'd like to be able to participate in these conversations and have these experiences. Not only would you be surprised how much your friends would love to help you get the experience, people generally mostly talk about their successes until they feel comfortable to share their failures, their shortcomings, these moments where they didn't feel like king of the world. And so sharing any of that from yourself, of being like, oh, I had this go totally south on me this one time, you would probably be very surprised how many of your friends have that exact story.
Everybody's got that awful, like, well, here's how I fucked up.
Yeah. So allowing for those conversations to also exist actually is going to bring I'm going to sound so like cheesy here, but like it's going to bring a deeper intimacy to your friend group, creating an environment where it's okay to talk about not just all of the times that you've boned the girl, but rather like sharing those times where you've had difficulty with anything, but in this particular case, relationships or sexual relationships, is going to give your other friends that freedom as well. And they might not be consciously grateful of it, but it's going to make you all closer too. Not to like totally take this in the cheese direction, but I think that's important as well.
Well, you make a good point. A lot of people kind of feel like they can't be vulnerable, or that expressing that like whole, yeah, I've never done this and I feel kind of bad about it, or here's how I messed up and here's all these ways that I kind of screwed up. Being able to open up and admit to that sort of thing is actually a real sign of strength. Mm-hmm. It's a real sign that you are willing to be open and honest with these people, and that you're not afraid of their judgment. You're not afraid of what they're going to say to you, even if they are going to be like, they're going to do the straight guy kind of razzing you thing, which I can appreciate, but on the other hand, I get really tired of that really quickly.
Also, though, like if this is like your close friend group, which it sounds like it is, because you say that, you know, these conversations have happened several times and you have these sort of long running underlying feelings regarding them, that is I feel slightly less likely to happen than, like, you know, would I do this with like someone I just met? Possibly not, you know.
The other thing is, like Al, the first call we had, I think a lot of the envy that you're having may be coming from the idea that you feel like you are somehow lesser or lacking for not having these experiences. And like I told him, all that is just an experience. It's nothing to do with your value as a person. It'd be like blaming yourself for not being able to participate in a conversation about quantum physics.
Right.
So it has nothing to do with your value. It has nothing to do with your measure as a man. It's just these are areas where you may not be able to contribute, and sometimes the best thing you can do is listen and not take it as there's something wrong with me because I can't participate.
Yeah. I think that's a really good sentiment as well. I took it in a slightly different direction. However, I think that also is a great way to combat those feelings of envy. That if you can see your friends as not always, you know, the super successful experience people, but being able to see them as complete humans who also have like been where you are and now look at where they've gotten, you know, in their successful relationships or successful sexual encounters. That's really going to help combat those underlying feelings of envy. They also mentioned anxiety. And like you had said, that part of that comes possibly from that personal or social stigma of feeling like you're lesser somehow. I think it also ties into what we had talked about in that same earlier call of feeling like you've missed the boat, it's too late, when there isn't a timeline on this. And so reminding yourself that there's not this timeline, that, you know, it's okay that you don't have these experiences yet, is going to help with anxiety feelings. And I think for me personally, what would help with envious feelings would be to just be able to recognize that your friends are not and were not always successful in every interaction. Those are just the ones they're sharing with you. It's like that. It's like their Facebook life, their Instagram life. They're only sharing like all those good statuses and the like cool photos of them, you know, diving in the coral reef. And when really today they're looking at those same photos like, ugh, and they're not getting out of bed, you know? So yeah, I think for me, that would be the way to combat those two separate, like, sort of background feelings.
Hi, Dr. NerdLove. My name is Nick, and I had two specific questions. One question is, how do I get over my approach or manage my approach anxiety when going up to a woman that I'm interested in? What are some techniques I can do? Because I've been reading some books and I've been hearing, approach 20 women a week. And to be honest, I find that to be kind of creepy. I work and I have my own interests, and I don't want to spend as much time, having an arbitrary number. So I would like your take on this. And my second question is, I saw your podcast on, the pickup artist community, and what are some good pickup artist communities in your opinion? And which are ones do you think are bad and to avoid? Because personally, I'm looking for a long-term relationship and looking to meet more quality women.
All right, so Nick, I'm going to take your second question first, and honestly, none. I don't really know of any pickup school that I would necessarily recommend. Granted, I'm biased. I'm a guy who's selling books and courses or whatnot, so I'm not necessarily going to recommend my competition, as it were, but almost everyone I see who's running a pickup school these days has something that makes me go, gah.
I think that if it's actually advertised as a pickup school or a PUA group or a pickup community, even if it doesn't maybe right on its surface sound like, it's one of the good ones maybe, it's a really easy pipeline to just fall down, in my understanding and experience with guy friends I've had that have, stuck a toe in the water.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some where, like, at least I like some of their advice. Other times I kind of sit there going, don't know about that. In terms of people that you could take boot camps from, me. Wait till I offer boot camps. They're coming. But to get to their first question, dealing with approach anxiety, here's my secret, Cap. I'm always anxious. Everybody deals with approach anxiety unless you're a complete sociopath. That is just true. Because when you're approaching somebody, whether it's at a party or it's at a club or whatever, there's going to be a part of you that's going to be afraid of rejection, and you're making yourself vulnerable to that other person. So it's understandable that you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to open myself up. I'm going to be showing them that I'm interested in them, whether I'm being obvious or whether I'm being subtle about it. It's going to be hard to not feel like you're being rejected on a personal level, when if they turn you down, there may be nothing to do with you specifically as to why they're turning you down.
Mm-hmm.
The two things that I suggest is, the first is using the 3-second rule, where if you see somebody that you're interested in, you give yourself 3 seconds before you have to assume that you're not going to approach them. And the whole point of that is to get you moving towards them so that your brain doesn't have time to engage the world's worst superpower of being able to come up with the worst of the worst case scenarios.
Yeah, just sitting there catastrophizing is not helpful to either party here.
Yeah, it's the dating equivalent to Final Destination. You're just picturing yourself going over and starting the conversation. It starts with hello. It ends with you getting maced, thrown in jail. You have to flee the country.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, the worst part is if you start letting yourself do that a lot and then you still do try the approach, you're bringing that in with you, whether you know it or not. And so when you go to, if you've already decided she's or they are going to reject you from the get-go, that's going to affect your tone of voice, your body language, just subconsciously is going to make, and it'll make that's outcome more likely. Not the mace in jail and stuff, but just like being turned down.
Yeah, because no one's going to really appreciate someone who comes up to them and they're sending the message of, it's okay if you don't like me. I wouldn't like me either.
No one wants to be hit on by Eeyore.
Exactly.
That's all we're saying.
But
I don't know. He's cuddly, but still. Like.
But by that same token, the two things I always suggest is, first of all, recognize that all you're doing is starting a conversation. That's it. Part of what makes it so hard is because we're going into this with all these expectations of, I need everything to go perfectly. I need to make everything go happen exactly as it has to so that she will like me. And then when I ask for her number, ask her out on a date, whatever, then she'll say yes. When in reality, all you're doing is starting a conversation and even seeing if this is someone that you're into on more than just a physical level.
Mm-hmm.
And once you can recognize that, once you can see it as just, I just want to talk with them and see if they're cool, that makes it easier. That frames the conversation in your brain so it's no longer so drastic, so important. And the other thing is, you would be amazed at how badly you can mess up and still have things go well.
True. Also, sometimes the cute failure, the something goes wrong and you handle it well, or maybe they're just into someone who is a little clumsy or klutzy or something. It happens, like I've been hit on before by guys who clearly were coming over rehearsing a line, and they got there and flubbed whatever it is they were gonna say, and you tease back, you're like, did you mean this? Or like, oh really, is that how you're going to phrase that? Like a gentle poke.
Yeah.
And if they can come right back with like, all right, admittedly, that's a line. Like, and just like, you're already, you said something, they responded, you get to say something else, conversation.
I mean, how adorable is Tom Holland as Peter Parker?
God, I love Tom Holland.
Yeah, it's like he's got the adorable thing going on, and women love that.
Yeah.
But you want to talk about times that someone's messed up. Here's the most memorable time I have ever messed up when doing an approach.
No.
I was at a bar downtown in Austin. The bar's no longer there anymore. It turns out apparently it was a money laundering.
You messed up so bad.
I messed up so far, the bar closed. Turned out it was a money laundering front for, I want to say, Lebanese gun runners. Not a
Okay.
joke. That's what it actually was.
I'm going to need links in the description on this one. That's
Yeah, there was a lot of bars in Austin that were owned by the same family, and apparently it was all money laundering for like a crime family. It was amazing. But what happened was I went to this bar. I saw these two women, and I was trying to do a group approach, which at the time was one of my weaknesses because guys get intimidated by approaching women in groups. And I went over to them, and
hint, we get intimidated approaching you with your guy friends too.
Yeah.
And obviously, Harris and I keep referring to this as like, heteronormativity, but that's most of the people writing in generally I've noticed are so.
And I go up to them, and before I even can open my mouth and say anything, I literally choke. Like I have aspirated on my own spit. So it's literally, hi. And the only thing I can think to do is like, turn around, walk back about 5 feet, turn back around. I made a big production of like readjusting my clothing. Okay. Walked back to them and said, let's try this again.
Honestly, if a guy had pulled that with me, I would be 100% there for approach too. I'd be like, okay, that took some nerve. And you had a great sense of humor about it, and I'm ready to hear whatever your opening actually is.
Yeah, that worked because I got the number. So it's if you mess up and you can play off of it, then you are golden. Because what that shows is you have a lot more confidence than necessarily, even if you're a little like clumsy or klutzy about it. Having that confidence to try again or to try to recover from it and not let it destroy you is really appealing.
This gives me a really good idea, and I know that it's not like a hot take or anything, but that makes me think, honestly, whatever money you were going to spend on a boot camp for a pickup community, just go take an improv class.
Improv class is one of the things I'm always telling guys to try.
It's going to be money much better spent because it's going to teach you skills that are useful in way more broad categories, not just in, romantic relationships or hitting on people, but it's also going to help you learn how to roll with your mistakes, pick up if someone else stumbles or fumbles, how to make someone else look good in a scene is also a good way to learn how to make someone else feel good or look good in everyday conversation. The person you're approaching might fumble, and making them feel like it's okay, like they didn't mess it up, is going to make them feel really great too. And so on top of that, now you're also putting yourself into a group where there's likely to be men and women, and you might meet someone with common interests there. Anytime you have that opportunity to have a common interest right from the get-go is going to help you feel more comfortable talking with those people. And yeah, like you were saying, like learning how to roll with your mistakes or being able to bounce back from that is a really good skill to learn.
And honestly, it'll help you get out of your head, because one of the things that improv will teach you is that the worst thing you can do is to try to be funny or to try to have the joke in mind. And instead, just be in the moment and just work with what you've been given.
Again, improv is going to be one of those skills, you're going to learn skills in those types of classes that are going to be more broadly applicable. They're going to help you deal with all of the crazy possibilities, like choking on your own spit,
Just do yourself a favor. Don't invite someone to come to your first improv show as a date. That's awful.
Oh yeah. Definitely don't do that.
Hi, my name is Megan, and I have a dating question. I'm really attracted to usually introverted guys, and I just was wondering, what's a good way to approach them without coming off as, I don't know, desperate or just a little bit too aggressive? Because waiting for them to approach me sometimes just turns into a mutual wall of silence.
So this is an interesting question, and Crystal, I think I want you to take the first crack at it, because as someone who is interested in guys, what would you do in a case where you're interested in somebody who's a little on the shy side, a little on the introverted side?
I have to be completely honest here and say that, one, I also I find myself attracted to to introverted guys. Particularly growing up as a girl who had boy interests. I was into the nerdy things. Like, I always loved Star Wars. I liked video games. And like, when I was a teen and a tween, it was different for a girl to be involved in these communities vocally. We all did it in private. So that said, a lot of my friends were I don't want to say antisocial, but people who were into these communities where it was really easy to be like really into your, you know, your fandom, your games, your movies, a lot of solo activities. And so I've had my fair share of trying to hit on or approach the quiet guy. That said, and this is where we get really honest, I am bad at that, because I'm one of those people who's like, I am very extroverted. I am very into like open, clear communication. If I'm interested in someone, you know it, like they will know. And so I have often been one of those girls that's called intimidating or like forward or whatever. And so I know that part of Megan's question here was like how to not be the aggressive, called forward, intimidating. It was like, I don't know if I am the best person to speak to that specifically. However, I will say this. I am always the person who somehow gets the quiet person at the party to talk. And again, we've said this in previous calls, but it applies even more so here. Get them to talk about themselves. Even just acknowledging like, hey, I see you're over here all by yourself. Is that by choice? Or, you know, because some people like being the observer, or approach it from your own self, right? Say like, I've, you know, my opener with the quiet person in the corner at the party has often been like, hey, you know, sometimes I like to sit back and just listen to everybody talk, you know, like I like to get to know everyone by hearing what they're saying. And a lot of times you'll find that the quiet person actually does have a ton to say. They just feel like maybe it's not relevant to the current conversation, or it might be like they're just one of those people that chooses their words carefully.
Personally, I'm kind of the opinion of somebody's got to make the first move, and it might as well be you.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because otherwise you end up with my friend Dr. Liz Powell, who is an actual doctor as opposed to me, who is a fake doctor, has talked about this especially with women who love women communities, so gay and bi and pan women, where because gender roles are still a thing even within those communities, you end up with two people who are not used to being the aggressor, and so nobody says anything. They just kind of sit there quietly waiting for somebody else to make the first move, and nobody does, and the moment passes. So I think being afraid of being the aggressor, being too forward, you kind of have to get over that to a certain extent, because otherwise you're both going to be waiting for forever. And I just come back to the idea of, think of the times when you have been somewhere and you don't know anybody and it's a little uncomfortable, and you kind of wish that somebody would come rescue you and start talking to you.
Talk to you about anything.
Literally, yeah. Like, oh God, thank you. I don't know anyone at this party.
Like,
whatever.
yes, I did want a drink, but I didn't know who to ask where to get a cup or whatever, you know, like.
Yeah, think of how good it felt for someone to rescue you from the isolation like that, and be that person for somebody else, especially if it's the shy, retiring, introverted guy that you think.
100%. 100%.
Hey, Dr. NerdLove. This is Michael from NYC, 26 years old. Well, my situation, let me put into context. I live with my boyfriend. He still lives with his ex that he dated for 5 years, but they had a falling out for whatever reason. But they still have a kind of codependent living situation. They actually have a business together. They have cars in each other's name, and they share bills. They even have both of their names on the lease of the apartment here in NYC. So, you know, I've been going through the relationship. I didn't really question it because I wasn't committed to the relationship, but, you know, that's whatever. So now a year later, now we're engaged, but we still have a lot of problems. It seems that we had a lot of arguments, and I just want to know if should I leave this relationship or not, because we've been having a lot of arguments about a lot of different things. But the main thing is that what I've found is that I feel like my boyfriend ultimately cares more about his feelings than mine, because there's a lot of instances where if his ex will call during a day and then his ex, has some problems crying over another man, then he will come to his aid, trying to see if he's okay, call him, which I get all that, but, there was times where I needed that and I was crying and I didn't get that. It's just like, I just feel pretty unhappy. So what should I do?
All right, this one's a little bit difficult because I got a little bit confused about the living situation because Michael's engaged with his boyfriend, but he lives with his boyfriend, but his boyfriend also still lives with his ex. So
they're living together. That's my assumption. Is kind of how I read it.
Yeah, that seems to be the big thing. They're all living together, and his boyfriend, now fiance, and the fiance's ex are still really financially entangled. And so I think that's the biggest problem, is that they're all up in each other's business, literally, in this case.
Yeah.
It's hard to get over somebody when they're always there. And
yeah, mm-hmm.
My first thought is that you can speak to this more than I can. Some of this seems to be like just the dynamics of dating in New York.
Oh yeah. So living in New York City, I can understand, especially before you're really committed, which Michael specifically says. He's like, he didn't care at first because he wasn't fully invested in the relationship. He was still sort of feeling things out. And now it's becoming an issue because they're getting more serious, really serious if they're engaged. It is one of those things that you just sort of take in stride living in New York, that everyone has roommates. It's really difficult to afford living on your own here. And if you can, you're making a good chunk of change, or you're living out in the middle of nowhere. So I can see how it would have been really easy to get into this situation. You start dating someone who has a roommate who was an ex. I know multiple people who live here who still live with exes because they're just already settled in their relationship. They're on a lease together. And some of those, it was amicable splits. Some of it sucked more for one than the other partner. But you just sort of like deal with it because it's New York. So I can, that makes this much more complicated because, the normal go-to advice, and I think you'd go with me here, Harris, is you both need to move out and get your own place together. But that might not be feasible or possible living in this city. And so that is a difficult underlying general issue.
So it's hard enough for it to get any distance when there's literally no distance to be had.
Right.
But the other is that it seems like his fiance still really prioritizes his ex to levels that are making him uncomfortable. And that's a point where you have to have a really awkward conversation with your partner, because honestly, you need, especially if you're married, if you're going to be getting married, you need to be able to say, hey, this thing that you're doing really hurts me, or this thing that you're doing is causing me concerns.
Yeah, if you can't have those sort of open communicative, like those sorts of talks about the tough subjects now, that's not going to just magically change because you officially are legally married.
Yeah.
So
especially when there's those financial ties involved too. And so this is a time where you and he should really talk about what his behavior, and B, his relationship with his ex, like why things are so tied together, whether or not it's possible to start detangling things. I mean, if they've got cars and businesses together and they're sharing bills and their names are all on the lease, it's time to start thinking about ways that maybe you have to question if there's ways of separating stuff. And if it is just a purely business relationship, you may need to start looking in ways of finding some more emotional space from these guys.
Right. And I would also add to that, like, so a lot of this stuff that he and his ex are sharing are things that normally you would share with your partner, your husband. So like splitting the bills, being on a lease together, these sorts of things. And so there might just be like a little bit of underlying anxiety there that may be subconsciously affecting how Michael's viewing this relationship between them. Like he might be feeling, well, that's all the stuff I want to be splitseasing, with my partner, and that's being held over there. The business thing, that is a whole other issue. I have no information on the business part of things, so I can't be like, well, can one of them or the other like buy out, or can they decide to make
sell
it
their
only
stake in
business?
it, or
Right. Like that is like a whole separate thing. But honestly, the thing that stands out just in general to me is that, putting normal like feelings things aside here, which sounds ridiculous because like that's what we're here for, right? But money issues are one of the biggest things that they have found that married couples or long-term relationship couples have arguments and disagreements about, and it can lead to a lot of other underlying anxieties, stresses, insecurities. And because everything else in this voicemail is related to money, like if all that you can do is sit down with your partner and be like, we need to figure out our finances as a couple, if that's the first and only step you can manage to have, like if it's too hard to have this other conversation, I can guarantee that will remove a lot of stress from this. When you fight about what color the sky is, that it's not about what color the sky is. When you fight about there's dishes in the sink, it's not about because there's dishes in the sink. It sounds like a lot of the stress that's causing some of these other fights that may be happening are coming from this insecurity in general and where they stand with each other.
And he says like it feels like his fiance's ex is getting emotional aid and emotional attention that he's not getting. And if that's the case, and they have this conversation and that doesn't change, then that's a time to start seriously reconsidering your relationship.
This is one of those situations where if nothing else changes, are you going to make that decision? Tough question.
Yeah. And we are going to leave it there. Crystal, where can people find you on the internet?
I am on Twitter at Clear as Crystal, and I am also on Twitch at As Clear as Crystal. Slightly different. Someone stole my original handle. But those are the two main places you can currently find me on the good old interwebs. I stream as well on Monday nights with Dan Olson on twitch.tv/foldablehuman. So you can catch me on every Monday night there, and about once a week on my channel as Clear as Crystal, and all of those announcements where I'm going to be and all of my funniest jokes go on Twitter at Clear as Crystal.
All right. And so you've heard from us. Now I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts about these questions in the comments below. Let us know what you think. If you really enjoyed this episode, be sure to let us know. We can do another, if there's enough interest, we can do another one, preferably with a name that isn't likely to be seen as a trademark violation. So if you have a short dating question you'd like to have answered on here, then you can call it in to 512-522-6513 and leave a voicemail. Or you can record it on your end and send it to doc@drnerdlove.com and put 4 YouTubes into the subject header. And since we're talking about learning how to date better, you want to overcome those self-limiting beliefs, you want to become a sexy badass, you want to learn how to overcome all that approach anxiety you've been dealing with, then you need to check out my book, New Game Plus, The Geek's Guide to Love, Sex, and Dating. This is the dating instruction manual that we all wish we had gotten when we first started showing interest in meeting other people. Be sure to check it out. Links to buy it are in the show notes below. And if you do check it out, do me a huge favor and leave a rating and review on Amazon and Goodreads. That's the best thing you could do for any author out there. Now, if you do it in the series, you know what to do. You've been there before. This has been YouTube. You know how it all works. Thumbs up, ring the bells, like, share, subscribe, etc. If you're really digging the videos, especially this episode, you'd like to see it continue and you want to support the channel, then consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/drnerdlove. Even $1 is a huge help, and it contributes to awesome content like this, lets this show keep on going, literally keeps the lights on, and like I always say, I can't do this without the support of my patrons, so thank you all so very much. And of course, thank you, Crystal, for being part of this.
Thanks for having me.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Nerdlove. You can keep up with the latest news at the Facebook page, facebook.com/Dr. Nerdlove. And as always, hit that logo to subscribe, check out my other videos, and I will see you here next time with more about love, sex, and dating. Later.